What is the meaning of the word null? Quite literally, null represents absolutely nothing at all. Null is not even a space character, and it's not the same as 0 either. A null value is, for instance, a column in a table that contains absolutely nothing. It does not contain a space character. It does not contain a 0. It contains nothing. Null is nothing. Effectively, what is in a table column with a null value is really just the column structure definition. There is no value in there at all. A few facts about nulls. Null values are not indexed. They're not included in indexes. Most functions, when passed a null value, return a null because there's nothing to operate on. You test for a null, for instance, in a filtering where clause on a select statement using the is null clause. The negative would be is not null. In other words, is a column null or is it not null? If it contains a null, you want to see if it is null. If you want to find out if it does not contain a null, you ask if it is not null. Let's take a look at a few simple examples. We'll go to SQL+ and we'll paste in a select statement, which selects two fields from the show table where the show date is null. There are rows in the show table which have a null show date. What's the result I get? I simply get the show ID with 4 rows from the show table with a show date which is empty. Let's try a second example. In this case, I'm going to add a value to the show date. Normally in Oracle, what you can do is you can add a value to a date and you get, for instance, date plus 5, you get whatever is contained within this date plus 5 days. In this case, you get nothing because you cannot add a 5 to a null. If I was to type select sysdate plus 5 from Dual, I would get today's date plus 5. Since today's date on my machine at this point in time is 15th of January, 15th of January plus 5 days is 20th of January. In general, an expression containing a null will always return a null. As we saw in the previous example, where we selected show date plus 5. The show date is null, add 5 to it, we get a null answer. There's a function in Oracle called NVL. What this does is allow you to replace a null value with a literal value, such as a 0 or an empty string, or even any string you like, or even any string you would like to replace it with. Here's another example using the NVL function. In the previous example, I attempted to add 5 days to null valued show dates, where show date is null. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the NVL function to the show date. If the show date is null, I'm going to replace the show date with the system date. I'm going to add 5 days to it. The result I get now is 20th of January. In order to demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste the same query in, and I'm going to remove the where clause. So I will now get all the show records, including the show records with show dates that are null and those that are not null. I've added 5 days to every date. I could demonstrate that more clearly by changing the SQL statement, selecting the sysdate, the show date, and then applying the null value replacement function to the show date using the sysdate. So let's see what we get. I need to find my null values. Here's one. Show ID 27 gives me the 15th of January for my system date, which is today. It gives me a null show date. As you can see, what's happened is this date has been replaced by the system date plus 5 because there's no show date. In the case of the record above it, we've got today's date, and then we've got 30th of August, and it's added 5 days to the 30th of August, which is a non-null show date, and it's made it 4th of September. It's very important to note when sorting rows with a select statement the null will always sort as the highest value. What does this mean? This means that when you select all rows, for instance, from the show table, if you were to order by the show date, the rows with the null valued show dates will appear right at the end. Let's demonstrate that. So let's select the show date from the show table and order it by the show date. We get 4 null records at the end. What this means is that as far as Oracle is concerned, the null dates are the highest value date. There is some other way we can actually demonstrate this as well, using the clause called descending. We'll get into this later when we go into the details of the order by clause and sorting data, but all this does really is pulls out the show date and orders the results based on the show date in descending order. So the result is the null values are no longer at the end, but they're actually at the beginning, because, as I said, they're the highest value. So if we go back to the beginning of this, we'll find 4 nulls at the beginning. That's how nulls behave in sorting data.